Silent Platoon Revenge, Operation Blind Spot. Title: She Cracked the Code. How a military intelligence officer exposed a $50 drug ring on base. I'm Captain Sarah Chen, a decorated Army intelligence officer at Fort Bliss. I discovered anomalies in supply chain logistics that exposed a massive fentanyl distribution operation involving senior enlisted personnel and corrupt contractors. When I was pressured to remain silent, I launched a covert evidence-gathering operation that dismantled the ring and brought down a colonel. This is my story. Act 1. The Anomaly 000-330. In the United States military, thousands of personnel are entrusted with life-and-death responsibilities every single day. But what happens when that trust becomes a weapon? When the people sworn to protect become the threat? I'm about to tell you what I uncovered. I was reviewing quarterly logistics reports. Routine work. Just another Tuesday at Fort Bliss. But something caught my eye. Pharmaceutical shipments to the base medical facility showed quantities that didn't match distribution records. I've analyzed supply chains in combat zones where lives depended on getting the numbers right. In Kandahar, if your inventory was off by even 5%, people died. So I knew what I was looking at. I pulled up the parallel systems, actual inventory versus documented inventory. There it was, a $2.3 million discrepancy in fentanyl allocations over 6 months, not spread out randomly. Systematic, deliberate. I leaned back in my chair and thought about my next move. My first instinct was that there had to be a simple explanation. Clerical error, contractor mix-up, document lag. I had to report this to my commanding officer, Colonel Reeves. That was my mistake. I walked into Reeves' office that morning. He was polished, commanding, exactly what you'd expect from someone with 26 years of service. I presented my findings, the discrepancies, the timeline, the pattern. He listened, nodded, then he leaned back and smiled. Reeves, Captain, you're seeing ghosts in the data. Inventory shrinkage happens. Expiration dates, documentation delays, contractor mix-ups. This is noise. Me, sir, with respect, that's a 7% discrepancy on a controlled substance. The D would. Reeves, interrupting. The D will be nowhere near this. You'll file this as a routine reconciliation and we move on. That's an order. I left that office with a pit in my stomach. Something was wrong, and now I knew I couldn't trust my chain of command. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at the files spread across my coffee table. I knew this was against regulations, taking classified materials home, but I couldn't let it go. There was a photo of my brother on my bookshelf. Tommy, 26 years old. He'd struggled with opioids for 3 years, rehabbed twice, fought for his life every single day, and someone was pumping fentanyl into his neighborhood. I needed to know why. I built a detailed timeline on my personal laptop. Every delivery of fentanyl arrived on a Wednesday. Each time, the quantity decreased by approximately 500 units before official documentation. The pattern traced directly to Warehouse 7, operated by Master Sergeant Derek Walsh. Over the next 2 weeks, I went deeper. I exploited my security clearance to access records I shouldn't have technically been viewing, maintenance logs, personnel access records to the warehouse, after-hours entry timestamps. Walsh's personnel file showed serious financial problems, wage garnishments, collection notices flagged in background checks. A man desperate, a man vulnerable. When I pulled Reeves' financial records, accessible through base audits but definitely not meant for me, I saw unusual cash deposits, regular deposits, significant amounts. And a third player emerged. Dr. Michael Torres, pharmaceutical contractor liaison. He showed repeated office visits to Reeves during non-business hours. The picture was becoming clear. This wasn't bureaucratic incompetence. This was deliberate, organized, and it went high. The risk. I reached out to Lieutenant James Morrison at CI'd under the pretense of an old training reunion. We met at a coffee shop off base. Morrison was someone I'd trained with years ago, sharp, principled, someone I could potentially trust. I walked him through the data carefully, without showing my full analysis. As I talked, I watched his face darken. Morrison, Sarah, if you're right about this, they'll come after you. Reeves is connected. Torres has organized crime associates. Walsh is desperate, which makes him dangerous. Me, so I'm not crazy. Morrison, no, you're in danger. The next day, I was called into my commanding officer's office. Not Reeves directly, but his supervisor, General Patricia Howard. The meeting was cordial, too cordial. The message was delivered with a smile, but the threat was unmistakable. My personnel file was being reviewed for security concerns. My TS/Psy clearance would be renewed in the next evaluation. Certain discretionary decisions made by junior officers during investigations could impact that renewal. It was a threat wrapped in bureaucratic language. Howard, we want to make sure you're focused on the right priorities, Captain. Sometimes intelligence analysts can develop tunnel vision about minor inconsistencies. Me, General, I wouldn't be here if I didn't believe this was significant. Howard, cold smile. Noted. Your input has been received and reviewed. Now we need you to focus on the Southeast Asia briefing package due Friday. I left that meeting understanding. Go quiet or lose my clearance. Lose my career. I made a decision that night. I couldn't go through official channels. Reeves controlled them. I couldn't trust the system. It was compromised. I decided I was going to gather irrefutable evidence. Working late at the office, I copied classified access credentials from a colleague who left early. I shouldn't have. I knew that. But I did it anyway. Using those credentials, I accessed the physical access logs for Warehouse 7 with timestamps. I photographed the printout with my personal phone. I was committing a federal crime to stop a federal crime. I was betting my entire career, my clearance, my freedom, on being right. The breakthrough came when I correlated the access logs with an external database I shouldn't have had, de-interdiction patterns in the El Paso region. The night before each fentanyl shipment disappeared from the base, there was an increase in fentanyl seizures by D on local highways within a 40-mile radius. The connection was undeniable. The drug ring was distributing product stolen from Fort Bliss through the El Paso drug corridor, one of the most active trafficking routes in America. Conservative estimate, based on the quantities and pricing, $50 million in fentanyl over 18 months. I realized the scope. This wasn't a handful of corrupt military personnel. This was a major trafficking organization using a U.S. military base as a distribution hub. And I was the only person who knew. The setup. I arranged a dead drop with Morrison. I photographed all my evidence, the manifests, access logs, financial records, decorrelations, burned them to an encrypted USB drive. I placed it in a locker at Union Station in Dallas, 1 hour from base. I left the key in a classified advertisement in the Dallas Morning News. Morrison retrieved it. He now had everything. I had insulation. If something happened to me, Morrison had the evidence needed for federal prosecution. 3 days later, Dr. Michael Torres arrived at my office with 2 men in suits, federal agents, or men posing as federal agents. My blood ran cold. Torres, Captain Chen, we'd like to speak with you about some regulatory concerns with your intelligence division. Me, I'd like my commanding officer present. Torres' smile disappearing. That won't be necessary. This is just a conversation. They took me to a secured room. The questions were aggressive, about my access to classified information, about files I'd downloaded, about my security concerns. But they never mentioned the trafficking. They were fishing. Torres, you've been accessing materials outside your direct assignment. This is a security violation. We can help you, Captain, if you cooperate. Tell us what you've been looking at. Me, I want a lawyer. The interrogation ended. I was escorted back to my office. My computer was seized. They were trying to scare me into silence. What they didn't know was that I'd already distributed the evidence. I had one move left. I called the Federal Bureau of Investigation's El Paso field office directly from a public phone. I provided Morrison's name and told them that CI'd had evidence of a major trafficking operation involving senior military personnel. I didn't identify myself. I hung up. Within 48 hours, FBI agents appeared at Fort Bliss. They seized Warehouse 7. They froze Dr. Torres at the airport as he was attempting to flee. They executed a warrant on Colonel Reeves' home. I watched from a distance as Reeves was led from his house in handcuffs, his family watching in shock. Master Sergeant Walsh was arrested at his home in suburban El Paso. The reckoning. 6 months later, at the Officers' Club at Fort Bliss, Colonel Marcus Reeves was court-martialed. The evidence was overwhelming. 18 counts of drug trafficking, 12 counts of conspiracy, 8 counts of corruption, 5 counts of violating the Uniform Code of Military Justice, 2 counts of threatening a federal witness, me. The prosecution presented everything. The financial records, the access logs, Torres' testimony. He flipped immediately, implicating everyone above him. Phone records showing communications between Reeves, Walsh, and Torres. Prosecuting JAG officer. Colonel Reeves used his position of trust to smuggle approximately $50 million in fentanyl into civilian communities. This isn't just criminal, it's a betrayal of every soldier who serves honorably. Verdict: guilty on all counts. Sentence: 35 years military prison, dishonorable discharge, forfeiture of all pay and benefits. Master Sergeant Walsh received 28 years. Dr. Michael Torres, facing federal drug trafficking charges in civilian court, received 30 years. 2 weeks after the verdict, I was called into General Patricia Howard's office, the same officer who threatened my clearance months earlier. Howard, Captain Chen, I owe you an apology. I didn't know. I was being manipulated by Reeves. Your investigation was exemplary. Your courage was extraordinary. Me, General, with respect, my tunnel vision saved lives. How many people would have died if that fentanyl had made it to the streets? Howard, your clearance has been reinstated. Additionally, you're being commended for valor and will be promoted to major. You've also been selected for the intelligence school, your pick of assignments. I accepted the promotion with a calm nod, but I was thinking of Tommy. I visited Tommy in a rehabilitation facility 3 months later. He was sober, 200 days clean. Tommy, I heard about what you did, about the trafficking ring. Me, I did it for you, for everyone struggling like you did. Tommy, Major Sarah Chen, that has a nice ring. We embraced. For the first time in years, there was hope in his eyes. Finally, they said if I stayed quiet, I could keep my career. They said loyalty to the uniform meant loyalty to corrupt officers. But I learned that real integrity means standing alone when standing alone is the only choice. Sometimes the greatest act of service is refusing to serve lies. I was committing a felony to stop a felony. I was betting everything on being right, and I was. This is what happens when someone decides that justice matters more than safety, when doing the right thing becomes non-negotiable. Please like and subscribe to this channel.